Byron Allen wears another hat. He's an entertainment tycoon.
When Colbert got unexpectedly canceled, I said, okay, do you like money? They said, yeah.
An 11,000 square foot mansion perched on 3.6 acres of Malibu cliff, bought for $100 million in cash. A $91 million compound on Red Mountain in Aspen closed in the spring of 2026. A late-night slot on CBS, the same network that just canceled its biggest star, now running his comedy show instead. And a cable network that as many as 30 million Americans turn to the moment a hurricane forms in the Atlantic. One man owns all of it, and if you stop 10 people on the street, almost none of them could tell you his name. His company was independently valued, at its peak, at more than $4.5 billion. He has been called the most successful media owner most people have never heard of, and the way his fortune actually works has been reported over and over in a way that misses the entire point. This is a study of black wealth, power, and legacy. The empires built quietly while the cameras were pointed somewhere else. And this is not the story you have already heard. You have heard the comedian. You have heard the lawsuits. What you have not heard is how a kid who used to sneak onto a Burbank soundstage turned a television career that could have ended at 30 into something that prints money, whether anyone remembers his face or not. If stories about ownership move you the way they move us, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is the untold side. Let us begin where it actually started. The Burbank Blueprint. Byron Allen Folks was born on April 22, 1961, in Detroit, Michigan. When his parents divorced in 1968, he moved to Los Angeles with his mother, Carolyn Folks. And this is the detail that changes everything. His mother worked as a publicist at NBC Studios in Burbank. So while other children were watching television, Byron was walking the lot behind it. He would slip onto the empty Tonight Show set, sit down behind Johnny Carson's desk, and play host to an audience that was not there yet. That is the blueprint, and it was set before he was old enough to drive. Most people who grow up around fame learn to want the spotlight. Byron learned something quieter and far more valuable. He learned where the spotlight plugs in. He learned that the show is the product, but the distribution is the business. By 14, he had written his first stand-up routine and was performing in comedy clubs across Los Angeles. The veteran comedian Jimmy Walker saw the act and pulled him onto a writing team that already included two unknowns named Jay Leno and David Letterman. Picture that room. 3 future giants of late-night television, and the youngest one in the chair is still a teenager, watching exactly how the machine is built. Fame depreciates, ownership compounds. He would spend the next 40 years proving it. The foundation years. In 1979, at 18 years old, Byron Allen walked onto The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, and became the youngest comedian ever to perform on the program. It was the kind of break that makes a career. NBC offered him a co-hosting seat on a new primetime show called Real People, and he held it from 1979 into the mid-80s. He toured as an opening act for Dolly Parton, for Lionel Richie, for Gladys Knight, and the Pointer Sisters. He co-wrote and co-starred in a network television film. He hosted his own syndicated program, The Byron Allen Show, from 1989 to 1992. By any normal measure, that is a successful entertainment career. And here is the part that matters. He treated all of it as the foundation, never the structure. While he was on camera, he was studying the thing behind the camera, how syndication worked, how advertising inventory was priced, how a station filled the empty hours in its schedule. The applause was nice, but the applause was not the asset. The asset was knowing, in detail, how television actually gets sold. The pivot to ownership. In 1993, Byron Allen took everything he had absorbed in those rooms and built a company around a single, unglamorous idea. He would produce television cheaply, distribute it himself, and keep the advertising revenue instead of handing it to a network. He founded what would grow into Allen Media Group and famously ran the early Operation Lean, doing deals from his own dining table. The early years were not a victory lap. Some of his first ventures failed. He came close to losing everything before the model started to work. But the model once it worked, was relentless. Instead of selling a show to a broadcaster and walking away, he gave stations programming and split the advertising time, then sold that inventory directly to advertisers himself. He owned the content, he owned the distribution pipe, and he controlled the money flowing through both. He also ran production like an industrialist. Where a traditional studio might shoot one show at a time, his crews would film several programs at once, working on a 24-hour schedule to squeeze maximum output from every set, every camera, every hour. Analysts later compared his discipline to the private equity playbook of Robert Smith at Vista. Standardized, repeatable, ruthlessly efficient. It was the opposite of the glamorous Hollywood image. And it was exactly why the margins worked when bigger names could not make the math close. Then came the move that defined him. In 2009, Byron Allen became the first television entrepreneur to launch a portfolio of 6 24-hour high-definition networks at the same time. Pets.tv, Comedy.tv, Recipe.tv, Cars.tv. Channels built around evergreen content that never goes out of date and never stops earning. He was not chasing a single hit. He was building a library. And a library, unlike a hit, pays you for decades. He kept stacking that library: court shows, comedy panels, lifestyle networks. Later, channels built specifically for Black audiences, including a network devoted to historically Black colleges and universities. At its height, the company was distributing content to nearly 300 million subscribers, reaching homes from Canada to Australia to the United Arab Emirates. By October of 2022, the operation he assembled this way was independently valued at more than $4.5 billion. The dining table had become a conglomerate, the Malibu compound. By the early 2020s, the income had become something you could stand on. In October of 2022, Byron Allen paid $100 million for a clifftop estate in Malibu, California. The property sits on 3.6 acres above the Pacific. The main residence runs roughly 11,000 square feet, with 8 bedrooms and 12 bathrooms, joined by separate guest and staff houses, a tennis court, and a private screening room. The history of the deal tells you how he buys. The estate had been listed in 2021 for $127.5 million. The sellers were heirs to the public storage fortune, and the land itself had been purchased back in 2003 for $20 million. Byron Allen did not pay the asking price, and reporting at the time described a cash purchase, $100 million, no mortgage. When you own your distribution and control your advertising, you do not need a bank to buy the view. Secondary holdings. The Malibu estate is the crown, but it is not the whole collection. In May of 2026, Byron Allen closed on a $91.3 million compound on Red Mountain in Aspen, Colorado, one of the most expensive corners of real estate in America. A ridgeline so exclusive, locals call it Billionaire Mountain. He owns property in Maui, he owns property in Manhattan, and in Beverly Hills, he assembled a footprint over time, including 2 side-by-side homes bought from a former technology executive, added to a residence he had picked up years earlier for $17 million. Notice the pattern. These are not trophies scattered at random. They are positions in the handful of markets where land does not really lose value, bought by a man who thinks about a house the same way he thinks about a network, as an asset that holds and quietly compounds while he sleeps. If you are still watching, you already understand what most coverage of this man misses. So if this is the kind of wealth story you want more of, take 1 second and subscribe. Now stay with us, because the houses are not the empire. This next layer is the ownership layer. Here is where the title of this video stops being a headline and becomes a fact. In 2018, Byron Allen paid approximately $300 million for the Weather Channel, the television network. He bought it from a group that included Blackstone, Bain Capital, and Comcast. And one detail matters enormously, because almost every casual retelling gets it wrong. He bought the cable network, the thing that broadcasts into your living room. He did not buy the website or the mobile apps, which had been sold off separately years earlier. What he owns is the channel itself, the one as many as 30 million Americans turn to when a storm is coming. And listen to how he explained the purchase, because it reveals the mind of an owner. He did not talk about ratings or demographics. He talked about safety, snowstorms, mudslides, the lives of families depending on the information. When a major storm hits, he said, it becomes the Super Bowl of weather, and tens of millions of people watch. He did not buy a channel. He bought a piece of national infrastructure that people reach for in their most fearful moments. That is a very different kind of asset than a hit show. But the Weather Channel is one holding among many. His company carries The Griot, built for black audiences. It has held an equity stake inside a major sports network deal. In March of 2026, Byron Allen bought a stake of roughly 11% in the premium studio, Starz, for $25 million. And in May of 2026, he went further than he ever had, acquiring a controlling 52% stake in BuzzFeed for $120 million, stepping into the chairman and chief executive seat of the company that once defined internet media. He did not buy a fading website for nostalgia. He bought a digital audience and a content engine he could fold into everything else he owns, with the stated ambition of building a streaming presence large enough to rival the giants. And understand the ambition behind these moves. This is a man who, in 2022, made a serious bid to buy the Denver Broncos of the National Football League, only to be outbid by a group backed by Walmart Wealth. A man who put forward multi-billion-dollar offers for Paramount and for BET, including a reported $14.3 billion bid to acquire Paramount and CBS in 2024. None of those mega bids landed, but the size of them tells you how he sees himself. He does not play at the edges of the media business. He plays for the center of it. This is the layer the cameras never show. Not the man on the stage, the man who owns the stage, the building it sits in, and the signal that carries it. Brand and operating businesses. And he never fully left the screen, because the screen is inventory too. For decades, he has produced and hosted shows built around his own name and format. Comics Unleashed. Funny You Should Ask. The court program Mathis Court with Judge Mathis. These are not vanity projects. They are low-cost, high-volume content that fills airtime he very often controls. He moved into film with the same logic. His company built a theatrical distribution arm and acquired finished movies outright, including the acclaimed Christian Bale Western Hostels, the political drama Chappaquiddick, and the rights to extend the breakout shark thriller franchise that began with 47 Meters Down. Buy the film, own the library, distribute it yourself, collect on it for years. The same idea that built the networks, now pointed at the big screen. The clearest example came in 2026, when CBS canceled The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, the 11:35 late-night slot. One of the most valuable in all of American television, did not go to another famous host. It went to Byron Allen's comedy show, under an arrangement where his company buys the airtime from CBS and sells the commercials itself. The same model he invented at his dining table in the 90s, now running in the slot David Letterman once owned. The kid from the writing room had bought his way into the room itself. The legacy lever. To read Byron Allen only as a collector of assets is to miss the most deliberate part of the strategy. He has spent years using the legal system as a tool of economic architecture. In 2021, he sued McDonald's for $10 billion, alleging the company maintained a separate, smaller advertising budget for what it internally treated as the African-American tier of media, spending far less with black-owned outlets than with the general market. He fought a separate years-long battle with Comcast that climbed all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States in 2020, a case that turned on whether a black-owned company had the right to the same business dealings as anyone else. These were not just grievances. They were arguments about where advertising dollars flow and who is allowed to receive them. When the McDonald's case settled, the resolution included the company agreeing to buy advertising at market value from his media businesses. Sit with what that means. He did not simply win a check and move on. He rewired a revenue stream for himself and for an entire category of black-owned media that advertisers had historically underfunded. That is the multiplier. One man's fight became a channel of capital that can keep flowing long after the headline fades. Charity gives money away. Architecture changes how the money moves. He chose architecture, the life now. As of 2026, Byron Allen is 65 years old. He runs his media group from offices in Los Angeles, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, and Charleston. He has been married since 2007 to the Emmy-winning producer Jennifer Lucas, and he divides his life among those homes on the coasts and in the mountains. In recent years, he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a strange kind of honor for a man whose real legacy was never the performing. And remember, none of this was guaranteed. Some of his earliest business attempts ended in failure, even bankruptcy, in the years before the syndication model finally caught. The empire was not inherited. It was survived into existence. It would be dishonest to paint these years as a simple straight line up. They have not been. Amid rising debt, his company moved through a serious restructuring. In 2025, it began selling off a large block of its local broadcast stations, and a single deal sent 10 of them to another broadcaster for $171 million, closing in 2026. Some read that as decline, but look at what he was doing with the other hand. While he sold the stations, he was buying into Starz, taking control of BuzzFeed, and moving into prime late night on CBS. That is not a man losing his grip. That is an owner trading lower-value pieces for higher-value ones, reshaping the board in the middle of the game. The synthesis. So return to where we started, the $100 million cliff in Malibu, the $91 million compound in Aspen, the late-night slot on CBS. The company once valued north of $4.5 billion. His own net worth is privately held and genuinely debated, with serious estimates ranging from around $735 million to roughly $1 billion, precisely because so much of it is locked inside a company that publishes no balance sheet for the public to read. And then there is the line that anchors all of it. He owns the Weather Channel, not a building, not a brand he licensed for a season. The actual national network that tens of millions of Americans tune to in the most vulnerable moment they have, when a storm is bearing down and they need to know whether to run. Think about what kind of ownership that really is. He does not own a city. He owns a piece of the country's attention in a crisis. He owns the signal. He owns the access. He owns the deeds and the distribution that carries all of it. Fame would have given him a moment. Ownership gave him the infrastructure. And there is the whole lesson, compressed into one career. The comedians he came up with chased the next laugh, the next special, the next room. He chased the deed under the room. They became famous. He became the landlord. That was the bet he made on an empty Burbank soundstage as a boy, and the math has held for 50 years. Now we want to hear from you. Of everything in his portfolio, which one tells the real story? Is it the Weather Channel and owning the signal itself? Is it the $100 million Malibu estate paid in cash? Is it the McDonald settlement that rewired an entire revenue stream? Or is it the late-night slot he simply bought his way into? Tell us in the comments and tell us whose empire we should profile next. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week we are opening another untold story of Black ownership, power, and the quiet empires the cameras keep missing.